Have you ever met someone and felt like they saw straight through you? Like their presence cracked something open inside you that you'd been trying to keep buried? It's not always love. Sometimes it's recognition of a wound, of a need, of a pattern that's been playing out long before either of you had words for it. That's how it starts, often. A glance, a conversation, a magnetic pull that doesn't quite make sense. You feel seen, finally, fully seen, and they seem so captivated by you, so enchanted by your soul. The way you listen, the way you care, the way you love with your whole heart. It feels divine. Fated. The kind of connection poets try to write about and never quite get right. But that magic, that intensity, that sense of being chosen, it doesn't always lead you somewhere safe. Sometimes, it leads you to someone who feeds off that light inside you until there's barely a flicker left. That's the story so many empaths live. And it's the one narcissists know how to write, chapter by chapter, like a script they've memorized by heart. So why do they find each other? Why, of all the people in the world, do narcissists seek out empaths like a moth to flame, and why do empaths, often knowing better, still let them in? Let's peel back the layers. Before we talk about the dance, we have to talk about the dancers. Narcissists and empaths aren't born, they're shaped. Molded by environment, by trauma, by the ways they were, or weren't, loved. And more often than not, their story begins in childhood. The narcissist was usually the child who learned that love was conditional. Maybe they had a parent who demanded perfection, who only offered praise when it served their own image. Or worse, maybe love was weaponized, given, then snatched away. They learned early that vulnerability was dangerous, that their true self wasn't safe or lovable. So they built armor. A false self. A performance. They became charming, grandiose, confident on the outside, but hollow and terrified underneath. Desperate to be adored, but incapable of true intimacy. Because real closeness would mean letting someone see the scared, broken child behind the mask. And then there's the empath. The empath was often the child who became the emotional barometer in their home. Maybe there was chaos, addiction, emotional neglect, narcissism, or mental illness, and so they learned to attune to everyone else's needs to survive. They became the peacemaker, the feeler, the fixer. They developed a heightened sensitivity, not just emotionally but spiritually. They could walk into a room and feel the temperature of someone's soul. And they thought, if I can just love hard enough, if I can just stay soft enough, maybe I can make everything okay. 2 children. One who learned to take. One who learned to give. One who hides behind a mask of power. One who bends under the weight of everyone else's pain. It's no wonder they find each other. It's no wonder it feels like fate. When a narcissist meets an empath, it's a perfect storm. The narcissist sees the empath and instantly knows, here is someone who will give. Someone who will admire. Someone who will reflect back their inflated sense of self and ask nothing in return, at least not at first. The empath's openness, warmth, and receptivity are like honey to the narcissist's wounded ego. And the empath, they feel special. Desired. The narcissist often comes on strong, charming, attentive, intense. They say all the right things, mirror your thoughts, echo your values. They create the illusion of deep connection so quickly it feels like they've known you in another life. This is the idealization phase. It's intoxicating. You feel high on their presence. You laugh more. You dream bigger. You start to imagine your life entwined with theirs because they've convinced you you are soulmates. Twin flames. That tired, romanticized myth that's often a trauma bond in disguise. And here's the cruel part, the narcissist believes it too. For a while. They genuinely think you are the one who will finally fix them, make them feel whole, worship them in the way they crave without threatening their fragile ego. They think you are the answer, but the narcissist doesn't want love. They want supply, and the empath. They want to heal what they didn't cause. The moment the empath starts to show up as fully human, when they have needs, opinions, or emotional boundaries, the illusion shatters, and the narcissist starts to see what they always feared, someone who might see through them. They can't tolerate that, so they start to chip away at the very person they once idealized. The compliments dry up, the adoration turns cold, criticisms sneak into the spaces where praise used to live. There's a subtle shifting of blame, a gaslighting of reality, a rewriting of events that makes the empath question their own memory, their own instincts. This is the devaluation phase. It's subtle at first, then brutal. The empath, deeply sensitive and conflict avoidant, tries to fix it. They take the blame, they shrink, they give more, love harder, hoping to bring back the person they first met. But that person never existed. Not really. It was a mask, a projection, a bait. And still, the empath stays. Why? Because deep down, it's not just about the narcissist. It's about the childhood wound being reenacted. The hope that if they can just endure, just love enough, they'll finally be chosen. Finally be safe. Finally get the love they were denied. This is where the trauma bond begins to harden. And this is where the empath starts to lose themselves. There's a kind of love that doesn't feel like love at all. It feels like obsession, like withdrawal, like waiting for the high to come back after it's long since left the room. That's the trauma bond. It's built on intermittent reinforcement, those small, unpredictable moments when the narcissist is kind again, affectionate again, like the beginning. It's just enough to make the empath stay. Just enough to make them believe. But it's not love. It's addiction. The nervous system gets hijacked. Cortisol, adrenaline, dopamine, it's a chemical cocktail that mimics intimacy but feeds off instability. It's the cycle of abuse, dressed up in romantic language. And for the empath, who may have grown up with inconsistent love, this chaos feels familiar. Familiarity is powerful, even when it's toxic. So they stay. They rationalize. They make excuses. They isolate themselves. They begin to feel like it's their fault. If they could just do better, be better, maybe the love would come back. This is the tragedy of the empath. Their capacity for compassion becomes the very thing that chains them to pain. There is no ceremony when a narcissist leaves. No warning. No final conversation that brings closure. Sometimes, they vanish into thin air. Sometimes, they end things with a cold detachment that makes you question if they ever truly cared at all. Other times, they orchestrate chaos so that when they leave, you're too broken to follow. This is the discard. And it cuts deeper than heartbreak. Because it's not just the loss of a relationship, it's the collapse of an entire identity the empath built around being needed, being chosen, being enough. The narcissist doesn't leave out of hatred. They leave out of boredom. Out of emotional exhaustion. Out of the emptiness that creeps in when the mask begins to slip and they're forced to face the terrifying void inside. Rather than sit with that emptiness, they run. They move on to someone else, someone new, someone who hasn't seen behind the curtain yet. And the empath? They're left picking up pieces that don't seem to fit anymore. What's cruel is how sudden it feels. Like a switch flipped. One day you were their everything. The next, you're nothing. You go from being worshipped to being erased, and it doesn't make sense, no matter how many times you turn it over in your mind. You wonder if it was all in your head. If maybe you were the problem. If maybe you were too much. Too needy. Too emotional. Too intense. But let me say this as clearly as I can, you were never too much. You were giving what you never should have had to give in the first place, your essence, your soul, your silence. The discard is brutal. It's a death of sorts. But like all deaths, it carries the seed of rebirth. You just don't know it yet. After the discard, there is silence. And in that silence, the empath is left with echoes. Words said in passing that now ring loud with meaning. Glances that now feel like foreshadowing. And the haunting question that plays like a song you can't turn off. How could someone who said they loved me hurt me like this? The grieving process is not linear. It's a war between your heart and your logic. Your heart remembers the moments that felt real, the laughter, the long talks, the way they held your face like you were fragile glass. Your heart still hopes, still searches the door, still clings to the dream that maybe, just maybe, they'll come back and say it was all a mistake. But your logic knows. It sees the manipulation, the rewriting of reality, the way you were slowly pulled away from yourself. It remembers the exhaustion, the confusion, the way your body began to shut down from carrying so much. You start to replay everything. Not to understand them, but to understand you. How did you not see it? How did you allow it? Why did you stay? And here's the answer that hurts. Because you loved with your whole being. Because your heart was trained to absorb other people's pain. Because somewhere, deep in your bones, you believed that love meant sacrifice. That staying meant loyalty. That endurance meant virtue. But love isn't supposed to dismantle you. It's not supposed to make you feel like less of yourself. The silence after a narcissist leaves is deafening, but it's also sacred. It's where the real healing begins. Because in that silence, you begin to hear your own voice again. Faint at first, but it's there, calling you back home. There comes a moment, maybe it's a slow burn, maybe it's a breakdown on the bathroom floor, when you realize this wasn't just about them. It wasn't just about the narcissist. It was about something older. Something ancient inside you. That moment is a spiritual reckoning. And it hurts like hell. Because you start to see that this pattern didn't begin with them, it began with your earliest blueprint for love. Maybe it was a parent who only paid attention when you were quiet and pleasing. Maybe it was a home where boundaries didn't exist, where you were expected to be the emotional adult before you ever knew what that meant. Somewhere along the line, your nervous system got wired to associate chaos with connection. Somewhere, the idea took root that if you could just love harder, bend further, be more, then you'd finally be worthy. That's what the narcissist triggered. That's what the relationship mirrored. It wasn't love, it was a reenactment of trauma. A performance of worthiness. A desperate plea to be seen. And when you realize that, it breaks something. But it also begins to free you. Because now, you can choose something different. Now, you can begin the slow, sacred work of rewriting the script. Healing from narcissistic abuse is not a weekend retreat. It's not a quick fix or a checklist. It's a reckoning. A slow stitching together of all the parts of yourself you were taught to silence. At first, you might not even know who you are without the pain. You were so busy tending to their needs, their moods, their shadows, that you forgot your own light. And now, the world feels too quiet. Too open. Too unstructured. But little by little, you remember. You start to notice what makes you laugh. What songs make you cry in that cathartic, beautiful way. You feel the sun on your skin and it doesn't remind you of anyone else. You have a conversation that doesn't leave you confused or small. And in those moments, you begin to reclaim yourself. You start setting boundaries, not as punishment, but as protection. You speak up, not to control, but to be heard. You learn to sit with discomfort without needing to rescue someone else from it. You begin to understand that your empathy is a gift, but it is not a contract. It does not require your self-destruction. You were never meant to be anyone's emotional sponge. You were meant to feel, yes, but not to bleed for those who don't know how to hold your heart with care. There's something wild and beautiful that happens when an empath heals. They don't become hardened. They don't become narcissists. They become discerning, boundaried, fiercely compassionate, but no longer self-sacrificing. They learn that love is not something to earn. It's something to choose. They realize they are not broken for feeling deeply, they are miraculous. But not everyone is worthy of their miracle. The healed empath loves differently. Slower. With more awareness. With more no's and more pauses. They love from overflow, not emptiness. From clarity, not fear. And when the narcissist comes back, as they often do, they see through it. The once magnetic pull now feels brittle. Predictable. Almost sad. Because the healed empath no longer needs to be needed. They need to be met. You may never get an apology. You may never get closure. But what you can get is your life back. You can write your own ending. Not by pretending it didn't happen, but by telling the truth about what did. You can grieve the fantasy. You can honor the version of yourself that tried so hard to make it work. You can forgive yourself, not for loving, but for abandoning yourself in the process. And then you can close the door. Maybe not with rage. Maybe not with vengeance. But with grace. With fire. With the quiet power of someone who has finally come home to themselves. Because you are not just a survivor. You are a storm that learned how to soften without breaking. A soul that still chooses love, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. And that is sacred.